Good morning, South Dade Shoutout. I'm so excited to be here this morning, where I am one of many hosts. Pleasure to be here. Dr. Joe Webb, the South Dade Chambers Operations Director. Definitely excited. Happy Wednesday to everyone. I'm also sitting here with my co-host and also the co-chair of the South Dade Chambers Military Affairs Committee, that being Tamkia Smith. Say good morning to Tamika as well.
Good morning.
I'm excited as we have here what I think is I'm very, very biased here, very, very special guest here this morning, the current wing commander of the Homestead Air Reserve Base. That would be the Colonel Joshua Padgett. Good morning, sir. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Dr. Webb. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to be here. As I said, I'm also a servant of this great military, and I'm going to be a little biased here and talk about the blue. Definitely excited. I've served here a term of 30 years in the Air Force Reserves, and a lot of it was done at Homestead Air Reserve Base. So I'm excited for you to be here this morning, sir, and excited for all of the people in what I like to call shout out land to hear more about what happens at this Homestead Air Reserve Base. We do more than just fly, fight, and win, as they say. So if you would, sir, tell us a little bit about yourself and also a little bit about the base when it comes to the everyday things that happen as we see the flight, the aircraft in the air.
You bet. Sounds great. So just a little bit about me. I grew up in the great state of Arkansas. Went to college there as well at the University of Arkansas and graduated in 1997.
Yes.
And from there I entered active duty. Did about 10 years on active duty, a variety of locations, New Mexico, Osan Air Base in South Korea. Came back to the United States, finished up at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, and then transferred to the Air Force Reserves at that point in 2007. Did quite a bit of time at Fort Worth, and then a couple of tours since then, one of which was at our headquarters at Robins Air Force Base in Georgia at AFRC headquarters, and then have been the commander here of the 482nd Fighter Wing and residing in South Florida since late last summer, and took over at the wing as the wing commander in December of 2022. So about 5 months for me as the 482nd Fighter Wing commander. And as to the second part of your question, I'm honored to represent about 2,200 citizen airmen from the 482nd Fighter Wing. A lot of those guys have two jobs, sometimes more than that. But we've got a great construct there. We've got a great local community, and I'm honored to be able to be here with you on the podcast and represent, right at 2,200 of our citizen airmen that are proud to call South Florida home. So thank you for having me.
Definitely a pleasure, as I said, and as I've served here at Homestead Reserve Base. One of the great things about the reserves is the ability to travel. I see you've been in many places. I've also had the pleasure of being in Korea, spent a year there active duty, and also served a temporary duty assignment when it came to actually some transitions and things that took place with the aircraft. So if you could discuss both some of the short-term and long-term impacts of Homestead, of the 482nd Fighter Wing, of the withdrawal from the Middle East and the transition to peer competition, and the focus on just some of the great programs that you had there. As I said before with myself, in one of them, as I spent time in Korea, one of the things we did there was transition aircraft from an assignment that was there to bring forth another type of to upgrade an aircraft at the time was what that was all about. So if you could just share some of the things when it comes to what took place in Iraq, that would be great.
You bet. So let me just kind of walk you through where we're at right now. So for us, we're charged with operating and maintaining and then being ready to employ 24 F-16s. So we've got, a large group of people that are dedicated primarily to that. And then there are some tasks that go along with that are not directly related to flying every day, but they go on behind the scenes. And we've got a lot of folks working hard, to keep that going as well. As both of you and Tamika know, and also I'm sure most of the audience knows as well, the F-16's been a workhorse for us, for the better part of 30
Yes.
years. Most of our airplanes right now were built in either 1985, 1986, or 1987. And so they're quite old, and they're starting to kind of show their age. They have been over the last few years. And for us, in the short term, I think we'll continue to fly these F-16s until essentially they sunset. That's kind of our term for when they start to time out and structurally At some point in the near term, they'll probably become unflyable. And, at that point, that's when we'll look to transition to whatever our follow-on mission at the 482nd Fighter Wing and at Homestead, whatever that follow-on mission turns out to be. We're hopeful and we feel like we're postured well for a fifth-generation aircraft follow-on mission like the F-35. But I think some of those decisions have yet to be made, and we'll just kind of have to wait and see what the Department of Defense chooses to do with the wing and with the base at that point. As to the second part of your question, which I thought was good as well, in terms of the pivot or the withdrawal from the Middle East and kind of what the future may look like, it's difficult to know exactly, but I do think that, over the course of the last couple of decades, we've concentrated our efforts primarily in both Afghanistan and Iraq, and to a certain extent, and for brief periods of time, in both Libya and Syria as well. And, I think that was necessary for the nation. We were proud to do it. But in the last couple of years, I think you've seen a pivot from a concentration on that particular area of responsibility with a bit of a shift in mentality and focus towards the Pacific and Indo-PACOM in particular. And, along with that comes a little bit different concentration for us, in terms of what we need to focus on. The missions in both Iraq and Afghanistan were from fairly well-established bases that, for the most part, were not under significant risk for attacks that were going to have a huge impact in terms of casualties on us. Those happened, but they weren't as frequent or of the same magnitude of what we might see if we look at what a potential conflict in the Pacific might look like. And that has an impact on our training and on our approach and on our equipment. Holistically, all the way around. We've got to shift our mentality, we have to shift resources, we have to change the way that we train, and we need to make sure that I need to make sure, and all the staff in the wing needs to make sure that we concentrate on getting our folks the right training and the right resources in place to make sure that they are ready if the nation calls upon us for a conflict in that region, if it were, God forbid, to happen. So I hope that answers your two questions there.
Oh yes, very, very detailed that, and definitely appreciated for what's being done. I'm hoping that you all out there are getting a great take of what it takes to run the air base there, and what it takes, as I said earlier, to fly, fight, and win, and just safety. So we're talking things that are happening overseas, as well as I'm sure there's some collaborations with other units with things that take place here in the South Florida region.
Yeah, that's right, Dr. Webb. We on a day in, day out basis, most of our training is conducted in South Florida here in this local area. So, the F-16s are flying here. Our maintenance team is maintaining the aircraft so that we can fly and train here in the local area. And then there are multiple, supporting airmen and also agencies, at the base there at Homestead that are supporting that operation and also conducting operations of their own that may not be directly related to the flying mission. As a matter of fact, as I speak right now, we have 10 airplanes in North Florida for a 2-week training exercise known as Checkered Flag. It's primarily air-to-air training with units from across the United States participating in what we call a large force employment exercise. And those guys are wrapping that up this week. Our guys should be back on the 20th. It's been thus far a great exercise. They've got some great training in. And we certainly appreciate the local community support and our command's, the opportunity our command has given us to participate in that exercise. So we're excited about the takeaways from that, about what we've learned, and translating that into lessons down the line about how we might operate in a similar scenario if something like that were to arise.
Beautiful stuff. So as we look at, as you can see, this is serious stuff out there, serious stuff. But yeah, I guess on a lighter note here, if we talked about some of the successes that we have, as a chamber, have had the privilege of being involved in when it comes to the base, if you could expound on just some of the highlights from the current year, as air show and some other things that took place that you would, I think was very successful. But if you want to expound on that,
I want to thank both you and Tamkia. We've just got tremendous support from the entire South Florida area, from the chambers of commerce, from our local civic leaders, from the MAC. We have an unbelievable network with our local civilian community. And, I think that benefits us. I'm hopeful that you guys feel like, we're doing a good job for you wearing the uniform and defending our nation. And, a couple of the successes that we've had that you guys both participated in, I know, I've seen you both many times, on base for different events that we've been honored to host. I think probably our biggest that I would, that comes to mind just right away is the air show that we conducted in early April there on the 1st and 2nd. Guys, it had been since 2018 since we'd had the opportunity to have an air show. We typically try to do that on an ongoing basis, roughly every 2 to 3 years. And we got caught up with COVID after 2018, and unfortunately, there was not a real good opportunity to have one since then. And so, in April, we hosted our first in 5 years on the 1st and 2nd. The team tells me our stats were about 140,000 over Saturday and Sunday. We think we had right at 60,000 on Saturday, and we think we eclipsed that on Sunday with about 80,000 members of the local community. And I know both you guys were able to make it out. We had just tremendous feedback. I think there was maybe a pent-up demand for an air show because it had been so long, and I think that made it doubly special for everyone that was able to attend. Had a lot of great acts there, United States Air Force Thunderbirds, the F-22 demo team, a lot of very talented civilian performers as well. It was a great event. It was an opportunity for us to give something back to the community and to be able to host. You guys do so much for us that we felt like, we needed to do something for the local community. And so that made us feel good that we were able to host you guys, and that just to see 140,000 smiling faces over the course of 2 days made us feel good. And so want to thank you and want to thank all the listeners out there for the opportunity to host. Want to tell you also, we look forward to being able to do it the next time. We think that's going to be in the spring of 2025. We've already commenced planning. It's a pretty elaborate planning effort. As you can imagine, to conduct an air show, it starts typically about 24 to 18 months out. So we've already undertaken that. And that's our plan, is 2025. So an early plug for all the listeners to mark your calendar for spring of 2025. We're going to try to do it again.
So looking forward to that, and looking forward to just continue to serve. We as a MAC, I didn't mention in the beginning, people out there. I also serve as a co-chair with this great young lady here, Tamkia Smith, with the South Dade Chamber's Military Affairs Committee, and we love doing all that we can to just ensure not just yourself, but also just the whole community can walk through the whole, I guess, the plight of just like a fish. I'm trying to figure the term for a fish, just getting acclimated into the community, and with all things. I know we're doing all we can in the housing area. We're doing all we can with education, with jobs and all the like, and of course, offline, or if there's anything else we can do just to enhance that, please don't hesitate to let us know. We love to be the voice. We love to be that of service, and to love to serve you as you all serve us. And I speak that passionately because I actually had the privilege of playing both roles, and Tamika's husband as well. I don't know if that was even, but her husband's also he's also in the service as well. So wanted to know just if you could, you gave us one great plug for the future. Mark your calendars for 2025. But if there's anything else that you can speak on as far as long-term future of the Homestead Air Reserve Base. We spoke about the F-16s, but anything beyond that as far as F-16s?
Yeah, I think we're, in the short term, I think we're good with our F-16 mission. I think that just for the listeners in the local community, I think you'll see that persist, in the short term, in the next few years. As to the follow-on fate in terms of what that looks like, again, I would say, I think we're very well postured for a follow-on mission. I'm hopeful, and I think we're suited for a fifth-generation mission in either the F-35 or a follow-on airframe, that may emerge down the line here, depending on what the DoD decides to do. But there are some unique aspects being here in South Florida that I think posture us well for that. We've got great training airspace, which for us is very important in terms of our level of readiness for a high-end conflict with potential peer competitors that may be out there. And so, I feel like that is something that's unique to this area, access to overwater airspace, both in the Gulf of Mexico and obviously also, on the East Coast and the Atlantic as well. That's very important for us. As you guys both mentioned, we've got great local community support. I think that's something that enables the base to have good long-term prospects and viability as well. Then I think just the basic construct of the Air Force Reserves is something that we need to focus on here as well. Our ability to take someone who's coming off of active duty. Dr. Webb, you mentioned this in your preamble there. Our ability to take someone who has 10 to 12 to 14 years of experience on active duty and maybe doesn't want to serve full time, but wants to continue to serve his or her country in a part-time capacity.
Yes.
I think that's one of our strengths is we take 12 to 14 years of experience and we give those folks that want to continue to serve, but not on a full-time basis. We give them the opportunity to do that on a part-time basis, and that's a win-win for the Air Force writ large, if you think about it. We are able to retain their talent and their expertise, which was cultivated, over the better part of a decade in many cases. And then we don't lose an asset, and we get a tremendous return on investment from those individuals. And the fact of the matter is, the only way to grow someone with 12 to 14 years of experience is to have, 12 to 14 years. And so, I feel like those two or three things posture us well for a long-term future here at Homestead and the 482nd Fighter Wing. Additionally, we've got a lot of mission partners that aren't part of the 482nd Fighter Wing per se at Homestead, which are very important, like SOC South,
Yes.
Customs and Border Patrol. Our mission partners, the 125th Fighter Wing with Florida Air National Guard, the 50th RSG with the Army. So a lot of folks at Homestead on the base that aren't specifically part of the 482nd Fighter Wing, but count on the base infrastructure and the local community as well. And those are mission partners that we work with every day. There's about 750 of them down there. So of the roughly 3,000 people on the base, just under a third of those are not part of the 482nd Fighter Wing formally, but they're part of one of those other 4 to 5 organizations that I noted. Just wanted to make the community aware of that. I think that's an
Yes.
important note to your point on the long-term viability and the importance of the base as well. So I think that's an important note that's highly relevant for how we look in the next 2 to 5 to even 10 years.
Yes, no, and great point in knowing that there's so many other tenant units down there. We pretty much cover all the branches, Army,
do.
Navy, Air Force, Marine, and Coast Guard.
That's exactly
there.
right.
So-
Yeah, not well known either.
Exactly.
And they're there doing the job every day, and a lot of folks just don't know that. They're quiet professionals.
Yes.
But we've got them there at Homestead. We certainly appreciate them. I know you guys do. The MAC is intimately familiar, but maybe some of the listeners aren't. So hopefully that kind of lets folks know exactly what's going on at Homestead and just how busy and how important and how robust the mission set, how diverse it is
Yes.
in terms of, crossing multiple services and multiple mission domains.
Yes, and that was a great point. There's so much going on down there at the base that is so viable to our borders, so viable to world missions, just so viable to our everyday. So I'm definitely appreciating you bringing up that point. And I must say that it's become a lot more as far as the job itself, but it is the best part-time job that I ever had. And you said it best. I literally served. Like I said, went to Korea, but had the pleasure of serving there when it was an active duty base. And I literally walked across the street to join the reserves. I literally took my folder,
Right.
walked across the street,
Yes.
joined, and of course was with the hurricane, everything took place, the transition took place. But I was so glad to see that the DoD thought it viable for a unit to be here, and
Right.
definitely looking forward to continue this whole idea of local service, of course, with a world mission. Now, if you would just give them, because we know about the tenants that are there, we know that there's so much going on there. If you could give them a little bit about you, I had the pleasure of serving on the flight line, working in some of the service units, so I got to understood what it meant when it came to the planes and the flight. But I worked in the wing as well. I had the pleasure of working in the wing and going to some of the meetings and learned so much more about the bigger picture. The aircraft is very important, right?
That's
but,
right.
But everyone else's every day is so important as well. And I would sit as I sat with many wing commanders, and if you could tell them a little bit about, obviously you're a pilot, experienced pilot, but a little bit about what you would be known when I was there as the boss. So a little bit
That's
about
right.
what the boss does with all this coordination of these units, and that you could take a moment there.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. And so, I don't want to turn this into a huge organizational hierarchy discussion, but I'll hit on it just real quick because I
Yes.
think it's important for folks to know kind of how we're organized and then subsequently how we train and equip. I think that's
Yes.
important for the listeners to know. It'd be better if I had a visual aid, but I'll just try to speak to it verbally if I can here.
Yes.
So, at the wing level, we have a staff of about 70, and our job is really just to facilitate what the subordinate units do. And then we have, essentially just a hierarchy. And that starts with our group structure. And so we're organized with a medical squadron first off. So, a couple of hundred folks there that are charged with medical care for 2,200 citizen reserve airmen there at the 482nd Fighter Wing and at Homestead. And then from there, probably the most familiar, I'll start there, and then I'll talk to some very, very important units in a group that probably doesn't get the recognition that they deserve. The operations group is largely comprised of the flyers and the folks that fly F-16s, and then the folks that support them directly. And what I mean by that is for our folks that work in the tower, our folks that are radar approach control, air traffic control, things of that nature. And then, we also have, folks that care for the pilot's equipment, aircrew flight equipment, administrative personnel that handle our records for us and do a fantastic job with that. And then you've got mostly the flyers and their direct support personnel that have to administratively run an organization as well. And that's the operations group. That's kind of what it's comprised of. From there, if we look at the maintenance group, which is essentially the folks that are charged with maintaining the F-16s, which is a full-time and an ongoing job, especially as I mentioned in that first question with an aging fleet, their job's level of difficulty has increased significantly. But, we've got a little bit over 600 in that group, and those guys pretty much, we fly the airplanes and they fix them and maintain them on a day in, day out basis and just do a fantastic job for us. And then from there, just a little bit over 1,000 in the mission support group, and that's probably our most diverse group. And when we talk about the mission support group, some examples of some subordinate squadrons and units that are housed under that umbrella. The Force Support Squadron, which is largely records management, personnel management, our Civilian Personnel Office, which kind of manages, think of them as most people would probably identify them or associate them with HR in a private organization. We've got a Logistics Readiness Squadron, which largely handles all the logistics for the entire base, whether that's equipment maintenance, vehicles, etc. We've got a large force of a couple of hundred plus defenders and security forces folks, which handle security for us on the base and make sure everything there is in line with standards, and we have the right people on base and keep people that don't need to be on base off base. And then, we've got about 17 miles of fence line down there to defend and make sure it's secure as well, and those guys do a fantastic job for us in that regard. We've got a large aerial port squadron whose job is basically to take heavy aircraft and load equipment on and off of them and make sure that that's done expeditiously. And then, a fairly large civil engineering footprint on base as well with our civil engineers that are charged with maintaining the facilities, making sure they're in working order, and then a lot of building projects and things along that line as well. And then there's some other organizations that contribute, like contracting and things that go along the same lines there under the mission support group. So those are just some of the organizations that you don't see or think about on a day in, day out basis, but they're vitally important and they're doing work every day. It's just they're not as obvious because they're not making as much noise, and you don't see an F-16 that's associated with it, but we certainly appreciate what they do. They do it quietly and professionally and without a lot of accolades, but, I just wanted to recognize those folks as well. And Dr. Webb, thanks for the opportunity to speak to that. That's important to me.
Yes.
If I may add, you were speaking on a lot of the building projects. What is your long-term goals, and what would you foresee in terms of the housing crisis that we're dealing with a lot of the militaries?
Yeah, great question, Tamika. So I think that what we're going to see on base, I'll just be honest with you guys, open book here. There's been a DoD-wide effort on the temporary lodging side to divest that. It's just not cost effective for us, and we're trying to be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, as you guys can imagine. And so, for us, for our folks that are part-time, and I'll hit on the full-time component here in just a second, but for our folks that are part-time that are coming in on the weekends or for training, throughout the year, it's going to have a minor impact on us because we'll need, local hotels is what we'll rely on at that point. I think we're in good shape outside of the tourist season on that, because I think the costs are commensurate with what we can afford, and I think that aligns well with how we fund things. I think during some of the busier times when the prices go up, we appreciate the work that both of you have done and the committee's looking at on maybe trying to normalize that a little bit for our folks that are out here during those high seasons in the South Florida area. We certainly understand that they're private enterprises and their bottom line is important to them, and so we're trying to meet them in the middle in that regard. That's the part-time piece. Now on the full-time piece for the folks that do live in South Florida, and I think the listeners all know this anyway. I'll be honest with you, it is not a cheap place to live compared to some other places that are out there for the military. And there's a reason for that. It's because South Florida is a great place to live. And so, that's kind of how it works. When demand goes up, there's going to be the prices are going to come up a little bit as well. And that's a concern for us. I think I know some initiatives are underway to help out our folks. I think, I don't think we can take extensive steps on controlling the price, but where I do think there's room for us to work together is, most of our folks have been well vetted. They are very responsible. And so, on things like deposits and, first and last month's rent and things like that, I think that's where we have room to maneuver and work with you guys on things like that, just so the upfront cost for our folks is not as significant. And then, the month-over-month cost, we can typically work through that in a variety of different ways as well. The DOD's actually done a great job of doing their best to ensure that our basic allowance for housing stays apace with local real estate prices here. Now it lags a little bit. You're never going to get ahead of that, but they've done a good job, in my opinion, trying to ensure that we keep up with that. And then I think as long as we stay diligent in that effort and we continue to work with you guys on a couple of those initiatives that I mentioned, then I think we're in okay shape. And you both know better than I do that the housing situation, particularly in close proximity to Homestead, is actually on what I would call an upward trajectory in terms of really nice places to live down there. It's becoming a more and more popular area. Not that it wasn't before, but I can remember coming here on temporary duty, 10 to 12 years ago, and the infrastructure that's in place now, in and around the 2, 3, 4 mile radius of the base, I can assure you was not in place, and you guys know this better than I do. That was not in place 10, 12, 15 years ago. And so, there's a lot to be offered down in the Homestead area that I think is great for our folks, and I'm excited about what the future holds.
Oh, very, very good. Very good. I am just elated, excited with you being here today. And if I could piggyback on something you said when it comes to the base, I'll give a shameless plug here. As the Colonel walked through all the different opportunities that are there, it's pretty much a community within a community. So if a person wants to be anywhere from a firefighter to a fighter pilot, that is available there at Homestead Air Reserve Base. As we look to close this out, I didn't know, sir, if you want to close with any comments, but definitely pleasure having you here. Look forward to further discussions on what's happening at the Great Base. But any closing remarks?
Yeah, I just want to say, it's an honor. I want to say thanks to both you and Tamkia for the opportunity to be here, represent 2,200 almost citizen airmen, the 482nd Fighter Wing at Homestead. I do want to say one final thanks just to all the local community, to the committees, to the councils, the chambers, our civic leaders, all the way up to the senatorial and congressional staffs. Just fantastic support all the way around that we get at Homestead. We appreciate everything that you guys have done for us in the past. We appreciate all the advocacy and all that I know you guys will be doing for us in the future. And we're just so happy with South Florida. We're happy to be here. We're happy to defend the nation, and we're happy to be partners with the local community. So I just want to say Thanks to both of you. Thanks to all the listeners. We appreciate all that you guys do for us, and we're happy to serve a great nation. So thank you.
Well, as we look to land this plane, per se, we want to thank you all for tuning in this morning, and look forward to future events. Look forward to future interviews. Take care. South Dade Shoutout.